with the University of Florida IFAS Extension here in Escambia County, and probably the most questions we get during our warmer season is how do I grow a really good tomato? And in our garden here we have a couple started, and these are some heirloom selections. One is called Black Beauty, which is a really delicious, attractive tomato that has a blue-black flesh and really nice red color on the interior. And you look at these and you say, well, yours look perfectly healthy, mine have all sorts of problems. How can I be this successful in the garden? So what we're going to go over today is to get you started with seeds, how to grow them off really nicely, and then transplant them so you have a nice stand of tomatoes that are going to come on in your own garden. So let's go over to our seed starting area and we'll get you started with your new tomatoes. Now, if you only want to grow one tomato, you can just go to the nursery and buy a transplant already ready for you to plant in your garden. But a lot of people like some things that are a little unique. For example, I have a very nice tomato here called Yellow Pear that you may not find in our local garden center. And so what you want to do is buy a package of seeds and start your own in the garden. So what I have here with this, you have to be careful when you're starting seed. You don't want to just use any type of soil. You want to use a very fine textured soil like a peat moss, and you can mix in, if you want, a little soilless mix like a perlite to give it a little air to that so water will drain through. If you're ever using perlite, be very careful though. It is dusty, so you may want to wear a mask to protect yourself so you're not breathing in that dust. But a lot of times we'll mix those together. We'll put this in our container where we're going to start the seeds. You can use one that has multiple cells like this one, or individual little 4-inch pots, however you prefer. Moisten that down, and then you're ready to plant your seeds. Now, a lot of vegetables are very small, and the seeds are hard to get at the correct depth. So anytime you're working with these really small seeds, what you want to do, a really successful technique, is to take a seed and drop it just on the top of that soil. And so I'll do a few of these here. And I'm not pushing it down in the soil at all. I'm dropping it right on the top. And it's still very tiny, so be careful. I then take a product called vermiculite, and I'll just lightly sprinkle this on top of that seed. And what this is going to do, this is going to provide a lot of moisture for that seed to want to germinate. I take my good mister. You don't want to use a hose because you'll wash that. And I mist this vermiculite. You'll do this about every single day until these germinate. And this way, what we found with this technique of growing small seeds, you have really, really good success with germination, almost 100%, as long as you don't let those dry out. That vermiculite holds this moisture right there close to the seed. Those roots want to take hold, and the new shoots will want to come up. Now, as soon as you see growth on that, these seedlings need to be in bright light. If they're in the house, you need to have an artificial light right above that foliage in order so those plants can start photosynthesizing. So now let's move on to our next stage here, and we'll talk about, once the seedling's up, how to transplant it into a larger container. Now, after several weeks under really good lighting, either outside in your grow house or under artificial lighting, you're going to have a really strong seedling that has germinated of your favorite tomato varieties. It's time now, because that root system has developed well in the cell, to transplant it to a larger container. So what we want to do, we're not going to use the same potting soil that we use to start seeds. We're actually going to use a really rich material that's a compost, and we've mixed in a little bit of perlite to kind of give it a little airiness so it drains well, but also holds some moisture for those roots as they're developing. So what I want to do is, I've got a gallon pot here, and I'm going to fill that up quite a bit with this really good soil and kind of shake it down. And I take some kind of tool to carefully lift out this seedling so I don't disturb the roots. Sometimes if you moisten this really well ahead of time, it works better. And then you kind of just lightly place this in your container, make a little indentation in here, and carefully press that soil around that seedling. Now it's going to be very tender at this point, and sometimes you need to add a little more soil to keep it upright. You don't have to put it in such a large container to begin with. It can be in a smaller one if you want, if it's more manageable for you, but this will work as well. And then kind of shake that down and firm it in. And again, we're ready to water this very carefully with a very light mist so we don't damage that seedling. Put this in pretty good sunlight, but remember it's a new seedling, it's a little bit tender, so you don't necessarily want to put it right out in the elements at this stage. Maybe a little grow house if you have that outside, or a protected area out of the wind until it gets more size on it. But this is the perfect start for your seedling until you're ready to transplant into the garden. Okay, we've had really good luck growing a lot of different varieties from seeds, but one thing that people don't realize, when they start things in small containers, your tomato, many of them are going to get very, very large. So if you're going to plant them in the ground, they're going to need a stake to support them, or if you're using a raised bed and container, you're going to need a fairly large 15-gallon container in order to accommodate that mature tomato. So we've started these and they've really grown off well. They're definitely ready for transplant into our garden or container. And so I have, again, really good compost that we've mixed in here. Tomato is one of the plants that we can actually plant deeply. Other shrubs and things, we want to make sure we plant at the right depth of that soil line, but tomatoes are one that can tolerate some of their stem covered. So what we'll do, we'll dig a pretty deep hole in here, set this plant deeply in, and then cover that up. Now it looks like there's lots of room, but this plant is really going to take off in this good rich compost. You're going to need to provide a stake, because a lot of tomatoes that we grow, like this one here, is called indeterminate. That means it's a vining tomato and will continue to produce stems as it grows up, sometimes to 6 feet tall. So provide a good staking system for that as it matures. You also want to make sure you water this consistently. One of the big problems with tomatoes as the fruit is developing is you get a decay on one of the ends, and sometimes that's related to inefficient watering, where we let the soil dry, get it wet, let it dry out. So every so often, every few days, especially in a container like this that's going to dry out, make sure you come over here and feel this soil, see if it has moisture and holds together, or see if it needs a little irrigation if we're not getting rainfall. But right now we've got a great tomato plant ready to go here in early spring, and soon we'll start having tomatoes. With these indeterminate types, they will produce over the whole season, so hopefully we're going to have a really good sandwich or salad as we get into May and June. If you need more information about starting tomatoes or about any other vegetable issue you have, call us here at Escambia County Extension and we'll be happy to help.